The Lord's Resistance Army, LRA, a name that evokes a chilling memory in the hearts of many Ugandans, has its roots deeply entwined in Uganda's complex post-colonial history. Formed in the late 1980s, the LRA emerged from the remnants of the earlier rebel groups, notably the Holy Spirit movement led by Alice Lakwena.
A 30-year-old mystic, Alice Awuma, who claimed to be under the influence of the Lakwena spirit, emerged out of nowhere to form the Holy Spirit movement. She claimed to have had a vision from God and was the messenger or Lakwena in the Luo dialect. She attracted thousands of former government soldiers and politicians. Her battles against the National Resistance Army, beginning in August 1986, were stunning since her army did not use weapons. Instead, they smeared their bodies with shea butter oil that Lakwena said was holy oil and believed the oil would deflate bullets.
Lakwena, blending traditional spiritual beliefs with Christian motifs, promised liberation, but her movement crumbled after her defeat in 1987. In this vacuum rose a more ominous figure, Joseph Kony, who transformed the movement into the LRA.
So when I am here, you have now seen me. I'm a human being like you. I'm also, I have brain, I wear clothes also. I'm a military position who is fighting in Uganda. I'm a freedom fighter who is fighting for freedom in Uganda.
Kony's leadership marked a shift to a more brutal yet mystical approach, claiming divine guidance and aiming to establish a state based on the Ten Commandments, yet paradoxically using extreme violence to achieve these ends.
He claims he is a prophet sent by God.
Do you believe that? I mean, do you believe he has that power?
The spiritual power was exercised, and I do believe that he had the spirit.
Do you think Joseph Kony is a godly man?
What he predicted comes true, but mostly he is from God.
The LRA, under Kony's command, quickly gained notoriety for its exceptional brutal tactics. The group's strategy was not merely military, it was deeply psychological, aimed at instilling fear and breaking the spirit of communities. Child abduction became a hallmark of the LRA, with thousands of children kidnapped to serve as soldiers and slaves. These children, torn from their families, were indoctrinated and often forced to commit atrocities, sometimes against their own villages.
But it's the children who've suffered most. The LRA is known for abducting new recruits. Boys as young as 10 have been kidnapped, given guns, and forced to commit atrocities.
Women and girls were not spared, many becoming victims of sexual violence and forced marriages to commanders. The LRA also engaged in mutilations as a tactic of terror, cutting off the lips, ears, and limbs of civilians to spread fear and assert control. This reign of terror was not limited to targeting civilians alone. The Ugandan military forces also found themselves frequently ambushed in the dense forests and remote areas where the LRA operated. The impact of the LRA insurgency in northern Uganda was catastrophic. The Acholi, Lango, and Teso regions bore the brunt of this conflict. Villages were destroyed and fields lay fallow as people fled for safety. The social fabric of these communities was torn apart. Trust eroded as suspicion grew, not knowing if neighbors or even family members had been coerced into becoming informants for the LRA. The displacement of communities was massive, with millions seeking refuge in internally displaced persons IDP camps under dire conditions.
The rebel came to our place When they came, they destroyed everything. All of us were staying in the bush. There was no any other way. Business was collapsed, education was spoiled, and very many things. We are actually poor not because we wanted to be poor, not because we are lazy. We are poor because we are being forced by many evil men who actually came and spoiled all our plans and the projects that were there. Even as I talk now, most of our people are staying in camps. They are actually suffering. There's no any other way for them to go back because the rebels are still there, killing, abducting, and doing many great havoc to the human rights.
This northern region has suffered a lot in the hands of Lord Resistance army. So many children abducted. So many children killed.
The psychological trauma inflicted on abductees and their families was profound and long-lasting. Children who managed to escape or were released found it challenging to reintegrate into communities, often facing stigma and isolation.
Sarah Amolo was 16 when she was kidnapped and forced into service by the rebels.
The divided work among the groups. Groups for killing people is there, group for beating people is there, group for burning houses is there, and other group for abducting children also is there.
Michael Aniwar was just 13 when the rebels took him.
I was abducted with my brother, and they told me I had to kill my brother and other people. If I didn't, I would be killed. They also told me to give them some money, but I didn't have money, so I was forced to kill my own brother. My own brother.
The Ugandan government, led by President Yoweri Museveni, responded with military campaigns against the LRA. However, the elusive nature of the LRA and the difficult terrain of northern Uganda posed a significant challenge. The government's approach also faced criticism, particularly regarding the establishment of IDP camps, which, while intended for protection, were often overcrowded and lacked adequate resources. Internationally, the LRA crisis gradually garnered attention. Humanitarian organizations strived to provide relief and aid to affected communities and to rehabilitate former child soldiers. The international community, including the International Criminal Court (ICC), sought to bring Kony and other top LRA commanders to justice for crimes against humanity.
In a 3.5-year trial at the International Criminal Court, some 4,000 people attested to the reign of terror of the Lord's Resistance Army and one of its senior commanders, Dominic Ongwen. Faced with 70 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity, he faces life in prison. His case is a first, as the sole LRA trial to reach a verdict at the ICC. Nicknamed the White Ant, Ongwen is accused of being a leader in Joseph Kony's army and helping to commandeer its bloody campaign on Uganda in the early 2000s. One that the United Nations says killed more than 100,000 people and led to the abduction of 60,000 children across Uganda and neighboring countries.
Efforts to bring an end to the conflict saw various attempts at negotiation. The most notable were the Juba talks in the mid-2000s, which brought a glimmer of hope. These negotiations, mediated by neighboring countries and international organizations, resulted in temporary ceasefires and a promise for a peaceful resolution.
Out of the bush and willing to talk peace, the leaders of the secretive Lord's Resistance Army in Rikwamba on the Sudan-Congo border. LRA soldiers guard the peace tent right next to the rebel headquarters. Child soldiers hang around the site, collecting food and water. A tent hastily erected in the forest clearing. Facilities in the bush include a generator, tables and chairs, and lunch. Security is tight, LRA bodyguards watchful as international delegates arrive. Agreement is reached, the peace talks on track. But what will it mean to the young girls and children forced to live in the bush? As a first step, LRA troops have agreed to assemble here in Rikwamba. President Museveni is looking for settlement after 20 years of war. In northern Uganda, the people are watching.
However, Kony's unpredictability and reluctance to fully commit to the peace process led to repeated setbacks. The final peace agreement, which seemed within grasp, ultimately fell through when Kony failed to sign it. His evasion of capture and refusal to engage meaningfully in peace talks left a frustrating impasse for both the Ugandan government and the international community. The LRA's activity in Uganda dwindled in the late 2000s, with the group moving its operations to neighboring countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo and the Central African Republic.
Ugandan Army spokesperson Brigadier Richard Kermeyer said in a statement that, quote, Joseph Kony, with less than 100 armed fighters, is now weak and ineffective. He no longer poses any significant threat to Uganda's security and northern Uganda in particular. Kony himself eventually moved to the Central African Republic. He's wanted for war crimes across Central Africa, including chopping off people's limbs and abducting children to use as soldiers.
Joseph Kony, despite being one of the most wanted men in the world, remains at large. The aftermath of the insurgency in northern Uganda is a landscape of rebuilding and healing. Efforts continue in rehabilitating former child soldiers, reconstructing communities, and fostering reconciliation. The legacy of the LRA insurgency is a reminder of the fragility of peace and the enduring strength of communities in the face of unimaginable adversity. The path ahead for northern Uganda is one of hope and resilience, as it strives to heal the wounds of a conflict that once seemed unending.